pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Good job, Mom. Good job. Way to go. Wow.
Too cute.
I know. Thank you, girls. I hope to see you again at another one, okay? Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Montanari, and I'm the one who's been emailing you and sometimes bugging you and asking you questions. So that's who I am. So if you like what I have to say, my name's Ellen. If not, my name's Misty. Sorry, Misty. We know it's warm in here. This is the first time that they've had this many people during the day, and
wow.
they've been learning a few things about how the system does and doesn't work, so we know it's warm. Yeah, it's warm. So if you want to take your jacket off, take your jacket off.
Good idea.
Yes. Smart man. Thank you. I'm Troy Morton, Del Mar City Council. Welcome to our new City Hall. A couple of tidbits about it that close to my heart. We have a state-of-the-art solar system on the roof. We have a Tesla power wall down in the garage.
Wow.
To power the
Wow.
system in the evening. If you hear a noise while we're meeting, some of these windows are automatically programmed. This room senses temperature, humidity, and CO2. Will automatically adjust the windows to accommodate.
Wow.
We collect rainwater off the roof, use it for the irrigation. We built all of this on budget, on time. It's beautiful and it's functional. It's our demonstration project on how to do sustainability.
When did this open? When did it open?
This opened last June, so
Yeah.
it's been here
Yeah.
just over 1 year. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Mike Levin, our Congressman. This is one of the reasons we built this room, was to do this kind of thing. So Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Dwight. Hey, thank you. Thank you. Can we give a big round of applause to all of our friends in Del Mar who opened this magnificent space and for all the work that went in to building this space. It really is incredible. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for making your way to our 8th monthly town hall meeting. And we're going to have one town hall a month for as long as I'm honored to serve in Congress. I'm really grateful that you're all here, and particularly grateful to have two of our Del Mar Council members, who you just... Where's Cheryl? Thank you, Cheryl, for being here. I'd also like to thank the officers who are providing security, and thank you to law enforcement. Can we give our officers a round of applause? And I would like to thank all of the volunteers who made this possible, and our amazing staff, and that starts with the incredible Ellen Montanari. Where's Ellen? Where'd she go? I don't know where she went. She left. Oh, she's in the back. So Ellen is doing an incredible job along with our entire team. I'd like to thank our campaign team who's here. I'd like to thank those on our official staff who are here as well. You really are the best. And every day that I get to spend working with you is a great day. I have a fair amount that I wanted to say, but really the key here is the question and answer period. Yes. Have I already gotten something wrong, Ellen? What's going on?
Just
Okay.
me.
Okay.
If you have an empty seat next to you, would you raise your hand, please?
Oh.
Okay.
Come sit.
Please come and sit down, y'all. You don't want to stand out in that breezeway. It is warm over there. So raise your hand. There's a seat up front. Jamie, where are you? Come on up here. No, don't do that to me. Okay, y'all who are standing up, this is your last chance. Not going to take care of you anymore. All right? Because we do need to try to keep it somewhat free back there so that, for fire reasons, please come sit. She says with a deep sigh. Okay, Mike, it's
Good?
not working. It's good.
Okay. Well, there are empty seats if you want to sit. You're not going to offend me if you want to sit down. And say, cool, if anybody needs water, hopefully we have water. Yeah. I'd like to begin also by saying that we are currently in what's called district work period. Some people refer to it as recess. it has been anything but recess. They keep me busier than ever, but I love what we're doing, and I want to go back. I would go back on the next flight to mark up bills on gun violence prevention and on election security and on domestic terrorism. So we took the month of August, or are taking the month of August in our districts, and it's been an incredible month to get to learn from so many of you, and I go back to Labor Day, and I want to thank everybody in the room that's here. You are the reason that we work as hard as we do, that we fight for the values that we share, and we're 100% committed to making sure that the federal government gets its act together, particularly on something like gun violence prevention. I see our friends from Never Again. I want to thank Roseanne and Ira Sharp for all the incredible work. Can we give Never Again a round of applause for all the work they're doing here in the city of Del Mar? You probably know that earlier this year the House passed H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 background check legislation that is broadly popular. Over 90% of Americans want to see universal background checks, and that includes a clear majority of Republicans as well. Unfortunately, like many other things, those bills are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. I am also co-sponsoring the assault weapons ban in the House, and I want to see it pass the House, and I want to see it sent to Mitch McConnell. It is very unfortunate that it takes tragedy to convince people of the need to act, but that's where we are in the country right now. And the president vacillates between wanting to do something and just listening to Wayne LaPierre and the NRA. And my great hope is if we keep up the pressure and we continue to have public sentiment on our side, that in time, even Mitch McConnell will be compelled to allow the Senate to vote on these bills. So keep up the pressure. Keep doing what you're doing. And I saw at least one Moms Demand Action shirt. I want to thank Moms Demand Action and Brady and Everytown and Giffords for what you do. Another issue related to gun violence prevention is domestic terrorism. And I want to also mark up the bills on domestic terrorism. The reality is we saw that it can happen anywhere, even North County, San Diego. And we have to stop this incendiary rhetoric that is leading to these sorts of incidents in its tracks, from wherever it comes. I went on record earlier today saying that President Trump's recent comments about disloyal Jewish Americans are clearly anti-Semitic and offensive. I think back to my father, who served in World War II, and after returning from service could not use our family name in his business. If he saw the type of comments that are being made today, he would find them deeply offensive, particularly coming from the Oval Office. So I don't care where the offensive comments are coming from, we have to stop. And with love. Can we do that? I'd like to shift gears entirely, and I'd like to talk about our coast, if I may. So we had another tragedy recently in Encinitas where 3 people lost. What I've learned is that folks at the Army Corps of Engineers and the Office of Management and Budget thought that what we were asking for was sand for tourism or recreation. And I had a pretty firm conversation with the head of the Army Corps of Engineers after the tragedy in Encinitas, and I told them, look, this is not about tourism or recreation. This is about basic safety. So I just wrote another letter, with Senators Harris and Feinstein, and I'm grateful to them for their help because it's going to take them as well to get the Army Corps of Engineers to finally fund the project, as well as the Office of Management and Budget to free up the funding. So I'm very hopeful. And again, sometimes it takes tragedy, but in the wake of tragedy, we've got to make sure that we do this, and when we do it, we've got to make sure that people know we're doing it for safety, not for tourism. Fair enough? So I want to turn for just a second. A lot of the work that we do in Congress happens, a lot of this stuff doesn't make cable news because maybe it's not as exciting. I serve on 3 committees. I serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, where I'm honored to chair a subcommittee on economic opportunity. I sit on the House Natural Resources Committee, where I'm on the Water and Oceans and Energy subcommittees. And I'm on the new Select Committee for the climate crisis. That's where a lot of my work happens. Earlier today, in fact, there was just a great story that literally was published half hour ago in the UT on the field hearing that we had this morning for the House Veterans Affairs Committee up in Oceanside with our veterans and with experts in the field of veteran homelessness. And I was there with the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Mark Takano, the ranking member of my subcommittee, Republican Gus Bilirakis of Florida, and Scott Peters, who represents, of course, the district judge from here to our south. And the 4 of us were there to learn from the experts. We had folks from the VA, folks from the Housing and Urban Development Department, Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, Veterans Village San Diego, a whole host of experts. And I learned a ton, and that work from all these great people in our community will inform me as I go back to Washington. I bring up that veterans work because in the 8 months that I've been there, we have got more momentum and traction for our veterans in a bipartisan fashion than in any other area that I've been able to work on. Who are the veterans in this room? Can we give them a round of applause, please? We have 1,300 homeless veterans in San Diego, and I want to get to an effective rate of 0, particularly in North County. It's not going to be easy, but we can work together, we could get it done. The subcommittee that I have jurisdiction over has responsibility for veterans housing, homelessness, the GI Bill, transition assistance, workforce development, and I am really proud of the fact that I've already gotten 7 bipartisan bills that I have introduced past the House. 2 of them signed into law already by President Trump. And the White House came over, the liaison, and they said, hey, do you want to go to the bowling alley? Do you want to go to the movie theater in the White House? I said, I'll go over there for one reason. That's to shake the president's hand and to sign veterans bills. For that, I'll do it. So we'll see. They haven't invited me, but he's signed a couple of the bills. So I want to spend a minute and talk about some of the environmental legislation that we're working on. I am proud to have co-sponsored 2 bills to prevent offshore drilling on the California coast. I had Secretary of the Interior David Bernhardt in my district office, and we had a meeting, and I said to him, Secretary, an overwhelming majority of people in my district, for that matter, people up and down the state of California, do not want offshore drilling. That includes an overwhelming number of Republicans, independents, Democrats. It's not a thing. It's simply that we do not want to see drill rigs off our beautiful California coastline. Will you commit to me, Secretary Bernhardt, that you will respect the will of Californians and not drill off our coast? And he said, I promise you that I will follow the law, which tells me we're in for a fight. And I'm grateful to Governor Newsom and to Attorney General Becerra and to Senators Harris and Feinstein and to everybody in this room, because we're all in this together. If we want to stop drilling off our coast, we've got to rise up against it. Nobody in here wants drilling off the coast, do you? No. Me neither. So we've got to stand up collectively and prevent it from happening. Also, we've been able to do a fair amount on renewable energy, even in a bipartisan manner. I introduced something called the Public Lands Renewable Energy Development Act, or PLREDA for short, and I got a Republican, Paul Gosar of Arizona, to co-sponsor it. There are now 15 Republicans and 14 Democrats, the last I checked, that are sponsoring that bill. 25 gigawatts of new renewable energy projects on our public lands by 2025. It is evidence that we actually can work together and get something done. And speaking of getting something done, I want to thank those in the room who have sponsored, from the Citizens Climate Lobby, and I see Eve Simmons back there, have sponsored H.R. 763, the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act. Thank you for your leadership. It is past time that we put a price on carbon and that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. I have sponsored, thank you. I have sponsored that legislation and a number of other bills. People ask all the time about the Green New Deal. The key with the Green New Deal is that we fill in the details, that we actually have the right policies to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint from transportation, how we move goods, how we move people, how we build buildings. This is a pretty good example of how to build an energy efficient building. How we farm, how we grow food, our agricultural practices, and then of course the electricity that we need to generate for all of the above. We've got to do it all. And if you have any doubt, well, none of you in this room, you live in Del Mar, you don't have any doubt, because we've got the Scripps Institute of Oceanography right down the street. Who here has heard of the Keeling curve? Oh, a lot of people. I love this room. This is fantastic. So in 1958, they started measuring the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. They measured 315. Scientists determined that 350 parts per million was the rate at which you begin to have very significant harm to our planet. And ultimately, it's not just to our environment, it's also to our economy. It's to our very way of life. So that's at 350. Hence the name 350.org. If you've heard of that group, that's what that's about. So the most recent measurement was what? Who knows? 415. 415, the highest that's been recorded in terms of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in human history. We're talking about a million years. Now, what do we know about that? Besides the fact that it's not good, that we've got to take bold and dramatic steps to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint. So let's talk about transportation for a second. That's the number one contributor. Depending on the report you read, it's anywhere from a quarter to a third of the overall greenhouse gas emissions. We need to dramatically reduce our emissions from vehicles, and that's why I have introduced in the House, along with many of my colleagues in the Senate, the Zero Emission Vehicles Act. What that bill will do is get us on a course to 100% clean cars. How many people here have a zero-emission car, an electric car? Oh, you're amazing. This is incredible. Hopefully somebody is charging it downstairs. I saw a ChargePoint charger down there. What the bill would do is it says by 2035, the auto manufacturers, by the way, President is wrong about the auto manufacturers. He thinks that they want to build dirtier cars. It's just flat wrong. They want to build clean cars for the global market. And they're doing that all over the world. And the question is, need or America will follow. Because what in 20 to 30 years will revolutionize the way that we move people and goods. And the question will whether or not the United States leads or whether or not we're driving clean cars that are built elsewhere in Europe or Asia, or whether or not we're building cars right here and leading in clean energy manufacturing just the way we've led in every other industrial revolution over the last 240 years. We right now, unfortunately, because we have abdicated our responsibility under the Paris Climate Accord, because we deny climate science, because we've fired the people at the various agencies responsible for climate change, we are blowing it. And so I need your help, and ultimately, I think there's a brighter day ahead, but we've got to stop digging the hole. That's why it's so important that we hold to account the EPA under this president. When you have the Secretary of the EPA who, after decades of bipartisan progress on banning toxic pesticides or getting the mercury out of the air, or lead out of our water, we're taking a step back. Everybody knows that. It's really unfortunate. I co-sponsored the Stop Toxic Pesticides Act, H.R. 230. I'm a co-sponsor of that because there is a new movement to bring back pesticides that we know are causing problems in children, developmental problems in children. And having two young children of my own age 7 and 5, I think that's reprehensible. That's where the buck stops with me. Dow Chemical Company that makes one of those pesticides, the Obama administration was going to ban it. We banned it here in California, thanks to Governor Newsom. They've banned it in other parts of the world. They know it causes neurological and developmental problems. But Dow Chemical Company gave $1 million to the Trump inauguration, and then all of a sudden their lobbyists started writing the policies at the EPA, and now they want to bring it back. I think it's just flat wrong, and I think we have to fight them. So, a lot of you, like me, care a lot about San Onofre. And I want to thank those in the room who are on our task force. Who here is on the task force? Thank you. All right, excellent. We got one. Hopefully, you're a great community liaison and you can tell everybody what's going on. Here's the deal. We have 1,600 tons of spent nuclear fuel, radioactive nuclear waste, not too far from here, right in the heart of my district. And it was never intended to stay there as long as it may have to stay there. We, back in the 80s, thought that we would have Yucca Mountain as a permanent nuclear repository. And Scott Peters and I just went there a couple Fridays ago, and I can tell you with a reasonable amount of certainty that we're not going to open Yucca Mountain anytime soon. So we've got sites all around the country with spent nuclear fuel and nowhere to send the waste. That includes San Onofre. Now, what makes San Onofre different is we've got 8.3 million people within 50 miles. We've got 2 active earthquake faults, and we've got sea level rise. And we know about the sea level rise because of our friends, again, at the Scripps Institute. They can tell you exactly how the sea level is going to rise and when. So one of the first things that I did, being informed by the task force that we created, which is chaired by the former Navy mayor, a retired Rear Admiral named Len Herring, who ran the Center for Sustainable Energy, and by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission under President Obama, they said, look, as it stands right now, nuclear waste, the oldest waste gets moved the first. That puts San Onofre somewhere in the middle. I believe that San Onofre's situation is unique, so we introduced the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act. And what it says is if you have spent nuclear fuel in an area with higher seismic risk or higher population density, your waste will be moved first. So that's a good place to start. In addition, right now there's a ton of money out there, which we all paid into at the Department of Energy for permanent nuclear repository, for the disposal of nuclear waste. There's also a lot of money for decommissioning, specifically decommissioning at SONGS. Ratepayer money, again, we all had to help foot the bill for that. But there's something in between. There's very little money for storage because we don't have a permanent repository, at least not right now. And the money that we have for decommissioning cannot be used to move or the waste to an site, nor used to fund that interim site being developed, sited, permitted, licensed, and all the rest. So I got $25 million in the House Appropriations bill for interim storage and money for the DOE to dust off their Atlas rail car, which is a rail car that they specifically designed for the transportation of spent nuclear fuel. So that's really important that we figure out. Right now, West Texas, I'm going to go visit West Texas. Our colleague in the House, Representative Conaway, we just met with him, and he says, yes, West Texas actually sees the economic benefit of this waste. So we have Rick Perry on board as well. Politics makes strange allies sometimes, but hey, if Rick Perry wants to move it to Texas, I've got no problem with that. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do in 8 short months. I know this is a crazy time in our country, a difficult time. I'm very concerned with our democracy and our democratic institutions. But just know that if you watch cable news all the time, and I don't recommend that, by the way. My parents watch cable news all the time. I try to tell them to have a balanced media diet, meaning pick up a newspaper, read a book, because if you watch, hopefully my parents aren't watching this. Sorry. If you just watch cable news, you're going to drive yourself nuts. I don't care which network. You're going to drive yourself nuts. And it's not a full picture of the work that we're doing, because they're going to go with the most sensationalistic, go with what the president tweeted that morning, or whatever internal strife they want to gin up. But I hope that everybody knows that we are rolling up our sleeves and we're trying to get things done for our district. And for me, whether it's environmental issues or veterans issues, or very basic things that we're trying to pass, we are trying to get things done. And the House Democratic Caucus has passed a ton of good stuff. The first thing we passed was the For the People Act. I think it's a no-brainer, but McConnell won't vote on it. It would get the dark money out of the political system. It would force us to use paper ballots. It would protect voting rights. And the other side doesn't want to vote on it. So if they ever criticize saying there's too much dark money, we'll vote on our bill. Go vote on our bill. We already passed it in the House. It's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. Just the same, we passed the Equality Act for LGBTQ equality. That's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. We passed the Dream and Promise Act for our dreamers. That's on Mitch McConnell's desk. We passed the Paycheck Fairness Act for paycheck equity for men and women, because it's unacceptable that women are making 80 cents on the dollar to this day for the same that man does. On Mitch McConnell's desk. We passed, as I said, H.R. 8, the gun background check bill, H.R. 9, the Climate Action Now Act to get the U.S. back in the Paris Climate Agreement. It's all sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. So the narrative that we're not getting stuff done, let's just remember what the Mitch McConnell graveyard looks like. And we've got to continue that public pressure, or he's going to have to find a new line of work. I'll close by saying this. Another thing that you don't know about, doesn't make the news, is all the amendments we get when we go and we pass a major spending bill. I got several amendments that I think will help San Diego, and I'll just list a few. One, an amendment to help ensure that low-income households in San Diego with rapidly rising rents receive adequate monthly federal rent assistance. To support the EPA's U.S.-Mexico border water infrastructure program so we can the Tijuana River. An amendment that would block funding in fiscal year 2020 from being used on offshore oil and gas leasing. An amendment to provide additional funding for the Naval University Research Initiative and UC San Diego. And I might add, we got over $180 million for a lot of the infrastructure at Camp Pendleton, and we were able to protect things like the money for the water infrastructure from being diverted to be used for the wall or anything else. So I'm really, really proud of everything we've been able to do. So now I want to hear from you. There's an awful lot of good stuff happening. There's one last thing. Don't forget to fill out your census form. Where's Shannon Bradley? She's here somewhere. Okay, so and I almost forgot Shannon, but I didn't forget. So the U.S. Census is really, really important. Why? Because if you all fill out the form, it helps us get federal funds to this district. So you're going to be getting the information on that early next year, around March of next year. You can do it by filling it out and mailing it in. You can do it online, or you can even do it over the phone. It's really important. It's confidential. Please fill out the census. See, Shannon, I did it. I didn't forget. All right. And if you have any questions, ask Shannon in our district office. By the way, if you have any issues whatsoever that you think our office can be helpful with, we have a great district office in Oceanside, and Francine Busby, who's our district director, our entire team there, and Shannon, who has done more casework, I think, than anybody on the team. But it's everything from Social Security, Medicare, immigration, veterans issues, you name it. And if we can't help you, try us. And if we can't help you, we'll try to direct you to someone who can. But I'm very proud. Last I checked, well over 100 cases had been closed from our district office. Again, that's great work that we do, and it doesn't always make the news. So thank you, Shannon, for all that casework. So with that, ground rules for the Q&A. I tend to speak too long. I know they're going to give me a buzzer at 3 minutes. But you get 60 seconds to ask whatever or to have any comment that you want. And Lisa, hi Lisa, will be the timekeeper. Usually has a nice bell or buzzer or something. like that. And she even has signs. So you get 60 seconds of where people are going. You're going to call numbers. So you're going to call numbers.
I am not going to.
You're not going to call
Well,
numbers.
wait.
I'm going to turn it over to Ellen because she knows what you actually want to do.
No, actually, I went over to some random person in the audience, and that random person is Denny. So wave. This is Denny's hour and a half of fame. Wave, Denny.
Thank you.
And he's going to be pulling the tickets out of the bucket here. So what will happen is we try to keep about 3 people here lined up. So when you hear your number call, come around, then you can go outside and back in the store over there, rather than cross up in the front if you don't mind. So you can be standing right along here, okay? And this seat will be holding the microphone. You can turn the microphone if you may not have it. I learned that a long time ago from a friend of mine who was a senator. He says, you know, Ellen, you never, ever let somebody else hold the microphone. Anyway, so I'm using it now with that information. So anyway, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Christy. Okay.
First number, 108. It's the last 3 numbers on the ticket that I'm calling. 108. 128. 016.
For talking about gun violence prevention and gun sense legislation early on. It's really super important to us and our voice in this room. So my question revolves around, you talked about gun sense legislation. I'm just curious if there are any Republicans, like from a practical point of view, that you feel that you can work with, whether it be in Congress or in the House or in the Senate. Hopefully it's not like nothing's going to happen until November of 2020. We hope they'll turn it all out, go Democratic across the board. But I'm just curious, seriously, are there any Republicans that are willing to work with us on these issues at that kind of place?
Thank you for the question, Tom. In my line of work, you have to be a perennial optimist. So you're constantly trying to find people to work with that are reasonable. And I'm encouraged. You don't want to rely too much on polling, but I'm encouraged by what I see from polling. There's one poll I saw that says 97% of Americans want to see stronger background checks. You don't get 97% for anything. The earth is round. So that is a really, really good sign. And even you heard President Trump say one day we need more background checks. And he talked to Wayne LaPierre and he said, never mind, just kidding. And tomorrow maybe he'll say something else. So I believe very strongly in the power of public sentiment. Abraham Lincoln used to say, with public sentiment, anything, without it, virtually nothing. So that's where you all come in. This is very much something that will need to be continued, the pressure from the outside, and we wouldn't be where we are made the progress in the House. Make no mistake, passing H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 was not easy. And we did get 8 Republican supporters on H.R. 8. And by the way, it was so named because it was the 8th anniversary of the tragedy in Tucson, Arizona, where former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot. That's why we named it H.R. 8. But we got some Republicans on that bill. We got some Republicans on H.R. 1112, which was the Charleston loophole bill. That bill very simply says that if you go for a background check and it doesn't come back yes or no because there's something going on, there's something wrong with the background check, you can't buy a gun during the period it's being reviewed. Pretty sensible. Dylan Root, who was the killer in Charleston, South Carolina, he was able to purchase a gun within that period. It was the 5th day after the background check, I believe. So HR 1112 would prevent that from happening. I believe those two bills are so overwhelmingly popular with the American people. As the Speaker likes to say, they are too hot to handle, meaning they are too hot for the Senate to avoid. And so we just need to keep the pressure on them. We need to make sure that people understand that it's in Mitch McConnell's court. I also want to see the House continue to mark up bills like the assault weapons ban, the red flag bills. We've now got 17 states that have some form of red flag law. We've got the equivalent bills in the House. She's telling me 30 seconds. Just know that, unfortunately, this is an epidemic in the United States of America. It's going to take a full court press for as long as I serve in Congress. I hope it's a long time if you'll have me back. And we're going to have to deal with this issue for a long time to come. It's awful that it takes tragedies to affect change, but I'm encouraged whenever I come to a meeting like this and I see so many of you going to work so hard and will continue to work so hard on what I believe to be one of the core issues of our time, one of the real moral challenges, is whether or not we can stand up and do the right thing. So thank you for your work on the issue. Thank you for the question.
143.
Hi, I'm Gary Orso from Encinitas. I understand that you came out for impeachment of the president, which I understand why I'm totally in agreement. But politically speaking, even if the House passes impeachment, the Senate will acquit. Trump will go on the campaign trail in 2020. He'll say, I'm acquitted, I'm not guilty, and we all know the Mueller report. Clearly, he was guilty of high crimes. Why give him this gift? That's what I don't understand.
So thank you for the question. Let's take a step back. There's a difference between supporting an impeachment inquiry and supporting impeachment of the president. And unfortunately, the media doesn't always get that right either. What I supported was an impeachment inquiry, which means a consolidated legal case that needs to be made by the Judiciary Committee and the other committees of jurisdiction in contemplation of articles of impeachment. That's our constitutional duty. The founders were very clear. Article 1 gives the Congress of the United States the responsibility to investigate the president for potential high crimes and misdemeanors, and the vehicle that we have to do it is impeachment. An inquiry in the Judiciary Committee, and that's what Chairman Jerry Nadler has called for. That's now what I believe about 125 to 130 of my colleagues have publicly called for. I can tell you there are more that haven't publicly called for it but believe it's the right course. Now, what are the differences? Well, we have the Mueller report. I read the Mueller report the day it came out. I've since read it again, cover to cover. I do have 10 hours a week on an airplane, so I have time to read it. And it was very clear. 2 volumes. Volume 1, all about Russian interference in our election. Volume 2, potential obstruction of justice in the investigation itself, from the president and from those close to the president. In Volume 2, there are 10 instances of potential obstruction of justice. Mueller sets out a statutory criteria as defined by 3 Supreme Court decisions, and he says that in 4 of the 10 potential counts of obstruction, there is substantial evidence that the president did, in fact, commit obstruct justice, that all 3 elements of statutory obstruction of justice were met. And if any one of us did that, we'd be in real trouble. But because the President of the United States, under Bill Barr's guidance at the Department of Justice, has said that a sitting president cannot be indicted, Special Counsel Mueller then turned to us, turned to the 435 members of Congress, and said it is up to you to determine whether or not we move forward with any sort of impeachment. The first step towards that is an impeachment inquiry. Now, we were going through investigations for a number of months. Unfortunately, those investigations only yielded stonewalling from this administration. Our documents were not being provided. Our witnesses were not appearing. So we've got to do everything we can to get to the truth. And it doesn't just stop with what was in the Mueller report. There's also things such as potential money laundering, potential campaign finance violations with Stormy Daniels and all the rest. You know all the sort of details of that. Potential emoluments violations. We need to build the strongest case possible before we go to the floor with a vote on articles of impeachment. And when I've seen the evidence, when I've seen the truth, there's only one truth, by the way. We all have our opinions, but there's only one truth. That's when I'll determine whether or not, give me another 30 seconds. That's when I'll determine whether or not we move forward with articles of impeachment. The most important thing is this. I know that the politics on this are divided. But I also know, with 2 young children, that eventually I'm going to have to account for what I did or did not do. And I would rather be able, in the years ahead, to look back and know that we protected our democracy and that we stood up for what we knew to be right, for what we knew the founders intended for us to do, rather than what we felt may or may not be politically expedient. And I will let you
117.
I told you I couldn't stick to 3 minutes.
101.
I was glad to hear that you were doing some work with low-income housing.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little more about affordable housing and what you plan to do, and also your thoughts on a tax credit to help with affordability with housing.
I'm a strong supporter of the low-income housing tax credit, and I also believe that we have to increase our supply of affordable housing. That's the only way we're going to continue to try to drive costs down. It's a really tricky issue, particularly in a place like ours. So we had this hearing this morning where we talked about veteran homelessness. And we had Nathan Fletcher, and we had Scott Peters, and myself and others, and it turned into a housing discussion because it's directly linked. Homelessness for our veteran community, the 8,800 overall in San Diego who are homeless, and those who are on the brink of homelessness. It all has to do, it doesn't all have to do, but it largely has to do with affordability of housing. And so what do we need to do? More supply. Now the challenge is that affordable housing means different things to different cities. I have had the opportunity now to meet with most of the mayors and city managers in our district, including here in Del Mar, but all up and down this district, and I can tell you what affordable housing means in Del Mar. It works for Del Mar. It doesn't work for Oceanside, it doesn't work for Carlsbad, it doesn't work for Vista, it doesn't work for Solana Beach. So we've got to meet every city where it's at. We've got to figure out what are the right resources that we can bring to bear from the federal level. And there are a couple of big, bold proposals right now in the federal government that I'm studying closely. I want to know how it's going to impact the 49th district. I want to know if it's going to meet the test to actually help build more affordable housing supply here. Well, one of them for Maxine Waters would cost something like $400 billion, something huge. Another one from Ted Lieu would provide grants to cities, up to $25 million for cities or for counties that have the best affordable housing plans. So I am open to anything that we think is responsible, that will actually do the job. And I also congratulate those local leaders, like my friend Catherine Blakespeare in the city of Encinitas, who have figured out creative ways to grow the affordable housing stock. In the case of Encinitas, with things like granny flats. Like I said, every city needs to do things in the way that's the best representation of your values, your priorities, and your ability to provide affordable housing. But it's something that I'm going to be focused on. I know our friends in Sacramento have varying opinions as well. Tony Atkins had SB 2 that I think is great legislation that will help provide some matching state funding. Ultimately, it's fascinating to understand how all these projects pencil for the developer of affordable housing. So trying to unpack all of the myriad of local, federal, and state incentives is really important. But the low-income housing tax credit is absolutely vital, and I'm committed to ensuring that it remains and that it's used effectively here in North County. Hi there.
Hi, Mike. My name is Saul Allen. I live just over the hill in Scott Peters District, but
Welcome.
well, I worked to get you elected.
Thank you.
In the last election. I'm happy to work in the other one too, because I really believe that this district needed you to take charge. However, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to ask you a question. The question I have follows up on the question the gentleman earlier put to you. I'm happy that you and I believe the last count 126 other of your colleagues have agreed to support an impeachment inquiry against this president and administration. But I also have an additional concern about this. Now, no matter who you listen to or talk to, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, correspondents, everyone talks about the reason why we can't indict the sitting president is because the Office of Legal Counsel prepared a memo, a law, not a Supreme Court or any ruling, that says, for various reasons, in their interpretation of articles of the Constitution, can't be done. And I keep hearing this and talk about going after him after he leaves office. That's not acceptable. So my question, Mike, to you is, what is going to be done about taking a run at getting that also legal counsel memo overturned and bringing an indictment that this president so richly deserved to have brought against him? That's one question. But before I answer that, I have one other.
She's going to get mad at you. No.
My other question is, among other legislation that is on Mitch McConnell's desk is a bill that would provide an additional $380 million of election security spending.
Yep.
He's sitting on that too. Is there a way, using the rules of the House, to attach any of this to must-pass legislation that the Senate either will sign, will vote for, and send over to Trump, let him veto it, or not pass it and look bad for the American people? Is that a possibility? So, if you can answer my first question about the legal counsel, and then the other one.
Good news. I have colleagues that are looking at both of those things. So I know that Chairman Jerry Nadler is looking at what can be done with regard to the OLC opinion. And I have to remind everybody that the Attorney General of the United States works for the people of the United States, not for the President of the United States. So with regard to, I think they're looking at the use of potentially the Congressional Review Act with regard to the election security, the SAFE Act, there's rules around how that works. But, I mean, my goodness, they can never, on the other side, claim to care about the security of our elections when we send them a clean bipartisan bill from the House, the SAFE Act, and they won't even hold a hearing. And let me explain something about this. This is actually a really critical point that I don't hear the media discussing enough. So I think people are hearing about the McConnell graveyard, right? All the things that we're sending over to the Senate. Here's the way this works. They don't have to agree on every last word of what we send them. They get to debate the bills. They get to mark them up. They get to send them back amended, and then the House and the Senate gets together and determines the appropriate course forward and figures out what can be passed that has the approval of both the House and the Senate. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. And we've never seen this before. We've never seen any leader of either the House or the Senate. And I asked my colleagues who have been there, literally been there for decades, has this ever happened before? Have you ever had a leader in the House or the Senate to do this? And Dick Durbin, great senator from the state of Illinois, sits on the Judiciary Committee. And he told me, we were at a dinner not long ago, and he said the only thing that the Senate is really doing is appointing or is confirming judges that are being nominated. In Senator Durbin's words, these are the least capable judicial nominees that he has ever seen. But this is truly unprecedented. So we talk about the McConnell graveyard as if it's a binary, take it up or down on a vote. But they can also mark the bills up and amend them, and that's how it's supposed to work. So it's maddening. Now, there are potential things that can be done. Maybe the Congressional Review Act. I know they're exploring. Look, if there is a parliamentary move, they're going to explore when it comes to election security. But it is ridiculous that we can't get anything done on things like getting the dark money out of politics, things like paper ballots, things like background checks for guns. This is crazy. And so that's why I think it would be good if Mitch McConnell found a new line of work.
121.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one's...
What's your name first?
Well, I'm going to tell you. So you're Mike Levin.
Yep.
I'm Mark Levin.
Whoa, okay.
Maybe we're cousins and we don't know it?
I don't know. Ancestry.com, we can figure it out.
So here's the... I'm obviously going to talk about anti-Semitism. So growing up in Chicago, family in New York, California, and Chicago, all Democrats. For decades, we're all Democrats. Grew up with a Democrat, voted for Jimmy Carter. Over the last number of years, starting with the Obama administration, we've been concerned about the Democratic Party and the anti-Semitism that's in the Democratic Party. Over the last couple of years, I would tell you that every single person in my family has walked away from the Democratic Party except my sister in Boston. We're all left the Democratic Party, and now we're voting Republican. So and what's going on with the squad, as they call it, is repulsive to me. It's repulsive to my Israeli girl. And so can you tell me what you can do and the other Jewish members of Congress who are not calling this out strong enough, and it's getting worse?
I called out anti-Semitism when members of my own party said it. I called out anti-Semitism when the president said it. When the president of the United States retweets that he's the king of Israel, or retweets comments that he's the most popular president in the history of the world in Israel.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
I just got back.
He is not as anti-Semite.
I just got back.
Converted to Judaism.
Can I?
So let's keep him out of the conversation.
My cousin from Chicago.
I'm asking you, let's just leave Trump out of it. I want to know how you're going to bring me back into the Democratic Party because I left because of anti-Semitism. That's my question.
Okay, you're going to have to make up your own decision, Mark. Just as everyone's going to have to evaluate the facts. We're all reasonable, intelligent people and make up our own minds. I can only tell you my own background. As I mentioned, my grandfather, Ted Levin, fought in World War II, came from Chicago, where my family's from, originally from Austria and from Russia. Jewish immigrants, came and started a carpet drapery business after World War II, called it Levin Interiors in Southern California, moved from Chicago to LA. Found they couldn't call it Levin Interiors because of anti-Semitism that existed in Southern California in the 1950s. This is a veteran, a World War II veteran, who taught me everything I know about patriotism and about service, who's no longer here to speak with us all. But if he were, I think what he would say is that support for Israel is not partisan. Support for democracy is not partisan. Belief in our democratic institutions is not partisan. And anti-Semitism is not acceptable regardless of where it comes from. But the issue is one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes in the book, which is dual loyalty, the notion of dual loyalty. No one should ever say that support for Israel or anti-Semitism is a partisan issue. I came out clearly and unequivocally and said that we must stand against hatred in all its forms, whether it's coming from someone on the far left, or the far right. I'll continue to say that. And I can tell you that what we've witnessed in the last couple of days from the President of the United States should not be tolerated. Should not be tolerated by the Jewish community. Should not be tolerated by anyone who is concerned with anti-Semitism. Because when you say that you have to be a particular political persuasion to be a supporter of Israel, it is simply wrong. Simply wrong. So you may not know this, but I just got back from the largest bipartisan delegation, 72 members of Congress, 41 Democrats, 31 Republicans. We all went to Israel. We met with Netanyahu, but we also met with the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, and we met with General Benny Gantz, who I think will be a great next prime minister for the state of Israel. They have their election in September. I learned everything I could, and then I came back and I saw that the Prime Minister of Israel barred 2 standing, duly elected members of Congress. I don't care about their ideology. I care that they're duly elected members of Congress in the greatest democracy on earth, and if they're to stand in Israel, members of the United States House of Representatives into the country. I think it's wrong for the Prime Minister to not allow them in. If we are to have a productive, bipartisan conversation, that starts with education, that starts with an open dialogue, not with a closed mind, not with closed borders. I know we can do better. Everyone in this room knows we can do better. We must insist it from our leaders, whether they be Republicans or Democrats, that we keep partisan politics out of this issue.
130.
Congressman, nice to see you again.
How are you doing?
I'm proud to have been an active supporter of
Thank you.
Mike since
Another easy question.
Since April 2017.
We only take easy questions.
Yeah, I want to know your view on abortion. Not So I'm here with my wife and my youngest son. We've been supporters of you. I predict you'll get an extra vote in November from the new 18-year-old back there.
All right.
Thank you. So I have actually a comment and a question. The comment is more of an appeal to your staff, your younger staff that I see here, which is to create diversity in a different sense in this room. We need younger people. We need younger people engaged. And so I just asked the younger people.
Looking at you over there.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
You too, Ellen, you too.
My question is a simple question but a tough answer, which is, what is your position on healthcare in a democratically dominated House, Senate, and presidency, and to whom? Residents, citizens, etc.
Thank you for the question. Let me begin by just echoing the importance of engaging young people. This past election, we had really a massive registration effort at UC San Diego and at our community colleges, and I'm proud to tell you that the youth turnout in 2018 in the 49th district was higher than it was in 2016, way higher than it was in 2014. 60% of the students at UC San Diego turned out and voted, and a lot of that was because of the work being done by the folks in the back. So I want to thank you. So it's really simple. I believe in quality and affordable health care for everyone. I believe that health care is a human right, and I believe that in the most wealthy country on earth, that we owe a moral obligation to try to provide quality and affordable health care to every single person. I think we need to do everything we can to protect coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. We have to dramatically reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We have to make sure that we negotiate for prescription drugs just the way the VA does. That's how we ought to do it for the federal government. And I am one of those. I think there's 117 of us now that are co-sponsors of Medicare for All. I also believe that there are a number of really good ideas to protect the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act is under attack by this administration. Don't forget that we were only one vote, the late great John McCain. So it passed in the House, right? The Trump Care, the American Health Care Act, it passed in the House. Went to the Senate, and John McCain walked out, gave it the thumbs down. That's the only thing that prevented the complete dismantling of the Affordable Care Act. That would have cost probably 10 to 20 million people their health insurance. And what I see now, unfortunately, not to get too far into the weeds, but you need the individual mandate in order to make the Affordable Care Act work. You need the diversification of the risk pool in order to make sure that premiums are, and co-pays and deductibles are low enough for people to be able to afford good health insurance. Otherwise, you wind up with junk plans. You wind up with high deductible health plans where people have the out-of-pocket costs that make it incredibly burdensome to be able to pay healthcare bills. Let me ask you this. Who here feels they pay too much for their prescriptions? Lots of people. Probably doesn't surprise you to know that I have never been in a room and asked that question and not had a lot of hands go up. So here's what I want to do. I see all these Democratic presidential candidates talking about various proposals. Some talk about Medicare for all. Mayor Pete, he says Medicare for all who want it. Biden, obviously is going to fight for the Affordable Care Act because that was a signature accomplishment of the Obama administration. First, let's get one of them elected. Let's take back the Senate. Let's keep the House, and then let's have a debate, and let's actually talk about the proposals and what they will mean, the costs, the benefits. I think the more people we can insure, the better. I think the more that we can build on the success, the lessons learned from the Affordable Care Act, the better. But again, the objective is quality and affordable health care for everyone. Thank you for the question.
Take yourself and get some women up here. Hold on.
097. There's no one there.
Hi, I'm Dan Hammer from Carlsbad.
Hi, Dan. Thank you.
I'm here with all the great work you're doing. You answered a lot of my questions about Israel, but I see the issue differently than your cousin Mark Levin.
I think maybe he was related to the other Mark Levin on the radio.
Okay.
I'm not related to that guy.
I'm a proud Jewish Democrat. I'm proudly disloyal to anti-Semitism, to tyrants, and to demagogues like Trump and Netanyahu. And my question is, what do Democrats do to keep this from becoming a wedge issue? And also a little bit more about what you learned in Israel.
So, I think actually I can answer both parts of the question with the same answer, which is we've got to see how the Israeli election plays out. One of the things I learned was how extraordinarily complicated the Israeli parliamentary system is. They, unlike here where you vote for a person, there you vote for a party. You literally take the name of the party on a piece of paper, and it's an incredible concept, piece of paper, and you put it in the ballot box, and whichever party gets the most votes gets to try to form a government. Each of the parties determine in their own independent way who their leader is going to be. So there's nothing written in stone. That the Likud party, which is the one that got the most votes back in April, because remember they had an election back in April, they had Benjamin Netanyahu as their leader. He was unable to form a government. He was unable to build a coalition. The Israeli Knesset, the equivalent of our Congress, has 120 seats. So you need a simple majority or 61. He was a few seats short. So they decided, President Rivlin, their president's more ceremonial, decided we need another election. So in September, they're going to have another election. Now, my opinion is that the move by Netanyahu to ban 2 of my duly elected colleagues to enter Israel was designed to placate the far right in the Israeli Knesset, because he needs to build a coalition. Again, he needs 61 votes, and the only way he can do it is if he gets the far right. Now, running against him, because technically he's not running against Netanyahu, but the second most votes was for the Blue and White Party. And the Blue and White Party had Benny Gantz as their head. Now, Benny Gantz is the former head, he's a general, he's the former head of the Israeli Defense Forces. We met as the Democrats, the 41 of us Democrats met with General Gantz and gave him a standing ovation, because he believes in democracy, and because he said that the first thing that he would do is take the 15-minute drive over to the Palestinian president in the West Bank, in Ramallah, and actually meet one-on-one with Mahmoud Abbas, something that Bibi Netanyahu is complicated, because there is no easy solution to this. They say you need a 2-state solution. Well, I would call it a 2-state resolution, because you're not going to solve some of the deep-seated long-term issues there. For example, you meet with Netanyahu, and they will give you maps, historical maps, of what it looked like. And they will say, this is historic Judea and Samaria, 3,000 years ago. All of this area, all the way up to parts of Lebanon, and parts of Syria, and parts of Jordan, and parts of Egypt. Then you go over to Palestinian president, and they hand you maps. They say all of this was historic Palestine. So not only can they not agree on where the borders should be now, they can't agree on where they were 3,000 years ago. So, and then you have the Temple Mount right in the middle of it all. You have Jerusalem and East Jerusalem. And right in the middle is the holiest place for everybody. So for those who are in land use, I'm an old land use person, I said this is the world's toughest zoning problem. But it really is. So it is incredibly complex. I came away with the belief that General Gantz is a step in the right direction, but that these leaders who are there are not going to be able to solve this anytime soon. And we have to be very concerned about what's happening in Gaza, because if we're not careful, we will have a humanitarian catastrophe. And my great hope is that Israel remembers it's a democracy, whether Bibi Netanyahu is there or not. Thank you for the question.
126 and 131.
Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm
Hi.
personally blue shirts and shoes rise on the campaign. A couple months ago in June, you voted yes on H.R. 3401, which was originally written as a humanitarian assistance package, but it was revised in the Senate to add billions of dollars more for funding for ICE and CBP. And then it came back to the House and you still voted for it. I inquired to your office about it, and you sent me a letter, thank you. And it said, ultimately, this is about getting desperately needed resources for children and families who are going without basic needs. The fact is, Congressman, no matter how this bill is written, I don't trust ICE and CBP to provide humanitarian aid at all. They're an enforcement agency. In fact, throughout their short history, when they have been given money for soap and amenities, they have shown that they will instead reinvest this money in enforcement as well, and will continue to harass our immigrant communities. The safest path forward for immigrants is to get them out of detention and to get them back with their families. And the only way to do that is to divest from detention centers and invest in community-based alternatives, just like the one that we have done here in downtown San Diego, the asylum shelter, which you support and which I volunteer at. So I'm asking you again, when this appropriations bill comes in the fall, will you pledge to withhold all funding from ICE and CBP?
Thank you, Jordan, for your work. I can tell you that that vote, along with the two-year budget deal vote, were the two toughest votes that I had to take in the House. And we were given about 2 hours of notice. So usually the way this is supposed to work is the House and Senate, I explained it before, right? The House and Senate are supposed to negotiate and come to an agreement that is more amenable to both the House and the Senate. The Senate, I think, on an 81-8 vote passed that bill. And then rather than giving us the opportunity to mark it up, which we thought, so I'm in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, so one half of me is Jewish, the other half of me, my mom's Mexican American, so I was literally in the room with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus maybe an hour or two before. And Debbie McChrystal-Powell, one of my colleagues from Florida, asked, what if they send us the clean Senate bill? What if Mitch McConnell just tells us all, to pound sand and says vote up or down? And no one even responded to her question because we didn't think it was going to happen. So we thought we were going to be there all night negotiating, amending the Senate bill to incorporate the House changes, to actually provide the guardrails that we thought were necessary. So then they give us the clean bill to vote on. And we're given no guidance, unfortunately, from leadership on what to do. And so I went to the person that I trust on this issue, who's been working on humanitarian border issues with children for 20 years. That's my friend, Dr. Raul Ruiz. So 435 members of the House, of all of them, Dr. Ruiz has done a ton working on these issues. And I share the concerns that you have. I worry about where the money's going to go. I can tell you that I met with John Sanders. He was the CBP interim head. And I asked him, and I say interim because you know the end of the story. I said, Secretary Sanders, or Director Sanders, will you promise me that not one more child will die unnecessarily on your watch? And I have children of my own, as you know, and so did he, and he said, I promise you. A week later, he was gone. He was gone. My concern is that McAleenan and some of these other folks that are in charge are doing things because they think it's what Stephen Miller wants, rather than what they know is morally right. That being said, I visited, and I'm going back at the end of the month to San Ysidro to see the situation there. And what I have seen there, I believe, demonstrates that the money for consumables, the $112 million that we voted on, at least there, that money for consumables will be put to a good purpose. What I saw there is different from what we see in Texas or Florida because of the nonprofit philanthropy. So the big difference, why don't we have overcrowding in the Port of San Ysidro the same way that we do in Texas or in Florida? It's because a lot of philanthropists have stepped up and they have funded things like through Jewish Family Service or the ACLU, the Rapid Response Shelter. So I applaud all of them. But it's a very, very difficult situation because $4.5 billion, you know what the behavior of this administration has been. You've got to make an up or down vote right at that moment. And I did what I felt was right because of the $112 million after Raul Ruiz voted that way and explained why. I decided to vote that way. The other really, really tough vote was on the 2-year budget deal, so I hope somebody asked me about that too. Because usually they give you a little more time. Maybe a couple days, maybe 72 hours, you actually know what it is you're going to vote on. On that one, we were all caught off guard. And I hope it doesn't happen a whole lot, but that's another Mitch McConnell special. So, thank you. Thank you for your work.
018-103-022.
Are they coming? Not all at once. Is everybody cool enough? Everybody's okay? No?
138. Hi,
How are
I'm
you?
Donna Runsack. I'm a psychotherapist in Carlsbad.
Hi, Donna.
Hi. I'm also, I actually have 2 questions, but I'm going to give up one if I can only have one, just based on something I've heard today. I'm part of the Immigrant Justice League, and we had a big protest in July on the 12th. But where I'm coming from is the babies in cages. And what we did here in San Diego, first of all, the whole administration is in violation of the 1972 Child Abuse Reporting Act. And for anybody that doesn't know, that bill was the first ever child abuse act that was placed in for us. And prior to that, children were handled under the Humane Society laws for animals, and that's how children were protected. So once this act came into place, Richard Nixon wasn't going to sign it, but then Watergate came along, and to distract from that, he did sign the bill. And really what I'd like to know is, here in San Diego, the Immigrant Justice League placed child CPS reports against the entire county board of supervisors. Why can't we do that for those involved in the federal government? Why can't we file child abuse reporting against the CPS reports?
Well, I guess you could file any report that you would want to file. I guess the question is what legal effect it would have. The issue is that just when we think this is as bad as it can get, it gets worse. So we saw just this week the Torres decision, which had been there for 20 plus years, I think. Now the administration is saying they want to indefinitely hold children. The good news is that, if there is any good news, is that it's with their family members. But look, the American Association of Pediatrics, anybody who's ever dealt with children, or any parent for that matter, you cannot indefinitely detain a child. That's where we as a society have to draw the line and say enough. And the two bills that we're working on, when we get back, hopefully we'll begin to address some of the humanitarian standards. In particular, there's one by my colleague Veronica Escobar. Veronica represents, she's an amazing representative for El Paso, Texas. She had to deal with an incredibly difficult situation, humanitarian situation. Now, of course, the gun violence situation there as well. But she has a bill that would set guardrails, and it follows on the heels of the border supplemental vote that we took earlier in the year. We were supposed to vote on that bill before we left, and they continue to debate it and mark it up. So I hope it's the first thing we do when we get back, because based on everything I have seen, it will be a strong bill that will force CBP and ICE to treat all people, but particularly children, with dignity and respect. Let me also just say how personal it is, not just because I'm a father with young children, but also because my own grandparents on my mom's side of the family came to the United States from Mexico when they were children. My grandmother was about 4 years old, came through El Paso. My grandfather was 12 when he came, and they were not put in cages, and they were treated with dignity and respect as human beings. And people who are seeking asylum to flee from political persecution or violence are not breaking the law. That is legal. Not only is it legal, it is moral. It's the values of our country. And for us to turn our backs on people and to have now the Statue of Liberty, the poem, to be misinterpreted as only applying to people from Europe, give me a break. Where does this end? It only ends, unfortunately, at the ballot box in 2020. Put the guardrails on as best we can. We're going to try to hold oversight hearings. So Elijah Cummings, I know, Chairman Cummings has a lot planned to expose some of this, but it's really at the ballot box in 2020. So I thank you for your continued advocacy, and keep fighting, and we'll keep doing the same as best we can. Thank you.
Zero 98.
Can I come back and ask a second?
140.
Hi there.
I'm Jean Smith. I live in Solana Beach. It's a little bit more local question.
Sure.
I'm wondering what your office can do to help expedite the relocation or shoring up of the train tracks through Del Mar.
Great question. So when I met with our mayors here in Del Mar and in Solana Beach, obviously this is of critical importance to this community. There are certain things that we can do. There are certain things that we can't. Jurisdictional issues require that SANDAG, that they have a plan with the input being informed by you, the residents of this community, and throughout the way AB 805, the new law, the new state law is written, it has a board that's supposed to really represent the interests of North County. But I can tell you that is a very expensive project, but moving the tracks inland in a tunnel is even more expensive. We're talking multi-billion-dollar. So the reality is, and I don't want to step on my friend Hassan's toes too much, he's the head of SANDAG, but I've learned a lot because I've listened, because I care about regional transportation for all of North County, San Diego, and for that matter, South Orange County as well. And I want to see multimodal transit. I want to see more public transit. I want to see alternatives to just getting in your car in a single occupancy vehicle and driving from point A to point B. And the cars that are there, I want to see as cleaner cars. We need all of it. And it's going to take resources. The reality is that Sandag doesn't have the resources we may think. We had Transnet. Everybody knows about Transnet, and then they re-upped it. And unfortunately, a lot of the money's already been spent. So what do we do with the money that's already there, that we actually do have? I want to make sure that as much of it as possible comes to North County. And what I mean by that is, let's get everything shovel ready, so that if we move forward with the 5 big moves, with the connected corridors, with the transit hubs, you have one in Solana Beach, where the train station is now. By the way, our new campaign office, right by the Solana Beach train station, right on Rios, hopefully will be open very soon. But the idea is you have these transit hubs, and then you have everything from ride sharing to being able to get a bike, get a scooter, you name it. So what it all is going to take is money, and I will leave it to Sandag to work with the mayors. And here's where we'll come in, is whatever the plan is that is locally derived, that's where the federal government will come in and match as much of money as we can. Billions and billions and billions of dollars in federal funds, and I will work and fight and claw for every single one of those dollars so that we can be proud of our entire transportation network in North County. In my district, the average commute is 27 minutes each way. That's 54 minutes a day, an hour a day, that people in our district are away from their families. And I want to do everything we can to reduce that number, and that's going to require, I believe, big, bold moves. So I appreciate the variety of perspectives on this. I also understand the perspective of wanting to make sure that the things we've already agreed upon get funded, get paid for. So I get it. It's complex. We need you to stay involved. And I think the folks at Sandag are doing a great job. We just got to keep moving forward for public transportation and for reducing our greenhouse gas footprint.
Hi, I'm Judy Borrell-Fine from Encinitas.
Great.
And thank you for mentioning the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, HR 763, and for co-sponsoring it. And this forum started with a question on gun violence and bipartisan action, and we're probably going to end, and I kind of have the same question. I love what you said about, I think it was Paul Gosar, and the renewable energy and how you have bipartisan action on that, and I want to know what you've learned from that and how we can get bipartisan activity going with HR 763.
Fantastic question, because I've wondered it myself, and sitting on the select committee on the climate crisis, I hear the arguments across the aisle on why we shouldn't act. I don't think they're very good arguments, because I think ultimately, not only is it the wrong thing from an environmental perspective, but it's the wrong thing from an economic perspective. And where I've been able to make the most traction is by talking about the sheer economic benefit of taking action on climate change, and specifically to grow the clean energy jobs of the future. There was an article recently that said, it was in the San Francisco Chronicle earlier this week, California now has 5 times as many clean energy jobs as fossil fuel jobs. That's incredible. And the clean energy number is going up, and the fossil fuel number isn't going up. And what did we do? Years and years ago, we had the Federal Clean Air Act. Very brief history lesson. And for those on staff, I'm sorry, because I give this history lesson every once in a while. This was bipartisan stuff for decades. When the EPA was created, Richard Nixon was president. When California wanted a waiver from the Federal Clean Air Act because it didn't go far enough, because we had smog. Who here is from Southern California? Remember all the smog? The smog alerts that kept us inside, kept me inside during recess when I was in grade school. We went further than that. We got a waiver from the Federal Clean Air Act. Ronald Reagan was the governor of California when we wanted that waiver from the Federal Clean Air Act. Fast forward, we dealt with acid rain. George H.W. Bush was the president. They developed the cap-and-trade system to deal with acid rain. It was a Bush administration, 41 Bush creation. Then in California, 2006, we passed AB 32. The governor was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we went further and faster than anyone ever had in any state, or virtually anywhere else for that matter, to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint. We then passed our own cap and trade with 9 Republican members of the Assembly on board to give it a supermajority, including Rocky Chavez, who represented this area at the time. Only in the last 2 years have these issues become so hyper-partisan, and it starts from the top when you have a president that is unwilling or unable to accept the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change. And moreover, I am tired of people saying that they believe in climate science. We believe in things that we may or may not know to be true. We know what is happening with climate science. If anybody wants a lesson, they can go right down the street to Scripps and get a lesson. Or you can go on the president's own website to the president's own scientists, the climate assessment that came out last year on Black Friday. They thought they were hiding it. Remember, they had it come out on Black Friday, but they didn't realize we all shop online now. So we all saw it, and we sent it to each other. It was a counterproductive measure. I bring all this up because at the end of the day, and I'll close with this, I know time is up, the last thing I'll say, is that we have a decision to make whether we invest in the clean energy jobs in the future or we double down on the dirty energy technologies of the past. California has led. America can lead. In order to do it, we're going to need a Democrat in the White House.
Congressman, this is your last question.
Last question.
But before we do that, wait. I have a few things, because I know that once he's done, y'all are going to leave and you're not going to listen to me. So, I have the mic. I took it away from the seat. First of all, I want to thank the city of Del Mar for hosting us in this glorious facility. And to your staff. The city employees have been absolutely amazing. So thank you. Let's say thank you to Kristen. How many of you are at a town hall for the first time? Raise your hands up high.
Wow.
Look at that. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Of course, I'm glad everyone's here. But I'm really glad that you all are here for the first time and hope that you can make it to future ones. Our next town hall is actually in a couple of weeks up in Dana Point. For those of you who want to make the trek, or if you have friends who live up north, that's on September 7th at the Dana Point Community Center. So, and all of our town halls, I don't know if you see the camera that's back here in the back. Wave your arms back there, okay? Those are folks that are doing this on Facebook Live. They're broadcasting on Facebook. So if you can't make it to a town hall, feel free to log on to Mike's Facebook page and you'll find it there. And I think it's also, tell me that it's also kept there and you can click on it later, yes? Yeah, that was a yes. Okay, good. All right. Hold on, I just lost my notes, of course. Hold on.
Well, she's doing that. Can we give Ellen a round of applause?
And also, for the volunteers, you know, I'm sure you saw the people with their badges. There's no way one person can do all this. So we've got about 50 volunteers that we use. So thank you to all of you, too, for that. Answered, and there were a lot of them. By the way, this is the first time I've had to beg people to put them in. So you all did a great job. If you didn't get your question answered, please go on Mike's website and you can enter the question there, and a staff member will get back. Know that they get about 1,000 of those sorts of things a week. Someone told me last week that it was about 1,000. So don't expect an instant answer. But if you don't get one right away, holler at me and I'll get it answered, right? And also the final thing is that all of you were given a white card. We're always looking for ways to improve this. We know it's warm. Don't tell me it was warm. I know it's warm. But other than that, if you have any way that you can think of that we can improve this, please let me know because we're always open to that. Okay, now it's your turn.
Thank you. My name is Harry Wilbur, and I'm from Carlsbad. I'd like to thank you for the excellent job you've done on so many, many issues, and particularly using the media to good effect. I ask, however, I implore you to do whatever you can to plead with the Speaker and leadership to impose some discipline on our party, to present voters a unified front, especially in the media, so that you can damp down the extreme and divisive voices that are detracting from our first priority, an absolutely critical goal of defeating Trump, holding the House, making gains in the Senate. All else that we want to do emanates from that. What are some of the things you can do with your colleagues?
So thank you. I agree with you. So I guess a few things. Number one, the media is very interesting. We have some good members of the media here. And I think virtually everybody is trying hard to do the right thing, who focus on journalism as a career. They're there because they care about a free press and fairness and hopefully doing the right thing. It's a matter of emphasis, though, and I think too often the internal divisions within our party become the story when, in fact, behind the scenes, the divisions are not as apparent, surprisingly so. So these same people that we think are, yelling at each other behind closed doors are really not. But they're feeding that media narrative, and unfortunately the nature of 24/7 cable news and now social media makes it a self-reinforcing system. Now, we have a great speaker. I think Nancy Pelosi is doing a tremendous job. And they don't like her on the other side sometimes because she's effective. And one of the things that she says to us as Democrats, as our caucus, is that our diversity is our strength, but our unity is our power. We've got to do everything we can to stay united, to stay focused, to make sure that people know our for the people agenda, the things that we've been fighting hard to do, whether it's to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to build infrastructure. We didn't talk about infrastructure. To build infrastructure in a clean, green way, or to get the dark money out of politics. That's ultimately how we won the election in 2018, by talking about that for the people agenda. That's how we will win in 2020. So what we do moving forward to ensure unity, we continue to talk about that in events like this. And for me, if you want to have a representative who goes on cable news and screams and yells, I'm not your guy. But hopefully you'll pick up the UT, or you'll turn on Fox 5 or whatever it may be, and they'll say what we did tonight and the local issues that we talked about, and our environmental work, and our veterans work, and our San Onofre work. And if we do that time and again around the country, I think that message will prevail over the narrative of divisiveness and toxicity. So it's on every single one of you to make sure that you tell your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, your colleagues, including ones you may disagree with ideologically, that while it is difficult in Washington, we are trying to get things done. And you don't always see what's happening on the cable news networks, which is why it's important to read the Union Tribune, or to pick up a book, or to watch local news. Balanced media diet. Those are the two things I think we need to actually get things done in Washington. We need a balanced media diet, and we need to get the dark money out of politics. If we do those two things, we're going to go a long way. I think everybody in this room is part of the solution, and I thank you for coming, because the fact that so many hands went up, and I'll close with this, that it was the first time that you've been here, it tells me that you are civically engaged, that you care about your community, that you want to be part of the solution. My challenge to you is to tell your friends, tell your neighbors, your colleagues, your coworkers, who've never been to a town hall before, who've never been interested in any of this before, because they don't think that politics matters, they don't think that government matters. You need to remind them that it matters. This is our democracy. It's only as strong as we make it. So I'm grateful to everybody for being here tonight. I hope that everybody follows us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything else. Our website, MikeLevin.org, has all of our legislative accomplishments. It also has ways you can get involved. And I hope that you will consider volunteering, because we need all the help we can get. It wasn't easy to win this seat. It's not going to be easy to hold this seat. We've got to fight for every vote. We've got to knock on every door. We've got to make every call. We've got to turn out every voter, whether they be young people or whether they be people who only vote every once in a while. We've got to make sure that they understand the importance of voting in this election. And I know if we do that, and if we continue to fight for the values that we collectively believe and to serve the residents of this district as best we can, I hope to be there for a long time to come. Thank you all for having me.